you found your way to the MDA Farm to School Grantee Kickoff call. My name is Nora Shields Cutler. I work for the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, and we've been supporting some evaluation work and technical assistance related to the Agri Farm to School grant. So thanks for joining us. And I think we'll just have folks introduce, well, when we get to them, but I've got some state agency partners who are with me on the call, and we'll be presenting all the technical detail that you need. So I wanted to encourage everyone, if you would, to introduce yourself in the chat. And it is a fairly content-heavy call, so if everyone would keep yourself on mute, and then at the end we will have some time for questions to be answered live, but also feel free to put any questions you would have in the chat as they come to you, and we'll make sure that all questions get answered either live in the chat, or we'll plan to also send out a follow-up email with all the written questions and answers if that's easier for you. Next slide, please. So today we've got just an overview of the grant, review for some of you, new for some of you, some details on making your grant purchases, local food purchases and equipment details, and then some reporting, resources and support. And as I mentioned, at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers.
All right, so let's dive in. My name is Kate Siebold, and I work at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture on farm to school and farm to early care, including this grant. And I work really closely with my colleague, Emily Mayer, who will be introducing herself shortly. We know that all of you are at least somewhat familiar with this grant program, since you all successfully applied for it and were selected as a grantee, so congrats. But we just thought it would be helpful to kind of review some of the basics to kind of ground ourselves for today. So as a reminder, the purpose of this grant program is to increase the amount of Minnesota grown and raised foods that are served in schools and early care centers in our state. And by doing that, expand market opportunities for Minnesota producers. This grant program has been around for about a decade, and it's kind of
New York and Washington, the first two.
We currently have about $1 million in annual funding. And this funding, majority of it goes to directly reimburse grantees for their purchases of Minnesota grown and raised foods. And for those grantees who also received equipment grants, some of that funding also goes to help you purchase kitchen equipment that will increase your capacity for buying, preparing, and serving more local foods. And we're really excited to be welcoming early care centers to our farm to school and early care grantee community this year. Fiscal year 2024 was the first year that early care centers could apply for this grant. So we're really thrilled to have several early care centers participating in the program this year.
All right. And hi, everybody. My name is Emily Mayer. I manage the farm to school grants at the Department of Ag. So this slide, it's just a little snapshot of who our fiscal year 24 grantee recipients are and kind of where they're located throughout the state. So we had a total of 62 first bite and full tray grantees, 21 first bite and 41 full tray. And then of those grantees, we had 17 who also received equipment grants. So it's pretty exciting to be able to sort of reach every corner of the state with these funds and to see kind of how every district has a different spin on farm to school. Next slide. All right, so just a little overview snapshot of the timeline for this round of grants. So food contracts, we have 2 separate contracts. So if you receive food funds, that's one contract. And then if you also received equipment, that's a second contract. So both of those contracts are going to start once they have been signed by all the parties. So there's a smattering of internal signatures, and then your authorized representatives from your schools or districts who also need to sign. These grants will wrap up in January of 2027. So we have quite a bit of time to use these funds, which is really great. But you don't need to take that full amount of time if you don't want. And then for fiscal year 24 full trade grants, there is a 1-to-1 match requirement. So that's 50%, we'll reimburse 50% of what you spend on eligible food items. First bite grants, there is not a match requirement. So we'll reimburse 100% of what you spend on eligible food. And then for the equipment contracts, there's that 50% requirement as well. So next slide.
All right, so next we want to kind of just talk about local food purchases, since this is the main focus of all of your grant projects. And we want to make sure that everyone understands the types of food that they could be buying with their grant programs, and the type of programs that they can be using that food in. And we also want to share some strategies for finding local farmers and producers and navigating that procurement process. So first off, this grant specifically focuses on increasing the amount of Minnesota grown and raised foods that's used in specific federal meal programs. So if you are a school district, you can use your grant funds to purchase eligible foods for use in the school breakfast program, National School Lunch Program, which includes the Seamless Summer option, and the Summer Food Service Program. If you are an early care center, then you can use your grant funds to purchase Minnesota grown and raised foods for use in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP. So any food that's purchased for use outside of one of these programs would be ineligible for reimbursement through this grant. So for example, we won't reimburse you for local food purchases that you buy for family nights or community events. We can't reimburse you for local foods used for classroom lessons, as well as the fresh fruit and vegetable program. We certainly encourage you to think about how you can support Minnesota producers through those activities, but you can't use your grant funds to do so. And then next, we'll just kind of talk about what are the specific types of foods that you can buy. So first and foremost, all foods that you purchase with your grant need to be Minnesota grown and raised. For unprocessed and minimally processed foods, this means that at least 80% of that food needs to be grown or raised within the state of Minnesota. So for example, if you're buying broccoli from a food hub that is maybe aggregating or pulling product from multiple farms, at least 80% of that broccoli order needs to be broccoli that was grown in Minnesota. Or if you're buying ground beef from a local butcher, 80% of that beef would need to be from cows raised in Minnesota. And then for processed foods, the first requirement is that that food item be made in Minnesota. And the second requirement is that that food item contain at least one primary ingredient, excluding water, that is 80% grown or raised in Minnesota. And the MDA does require processed foods to be certified as Minnesota eligible by that company. And so to do that, the company would just need to provide the MDA with like a letter or an email documenting that their food item meets the requirements of this grant. And
What's your
then
name?
MDA staff would review that and approve it if it meets the requirements. So some examples of processed food items would be like brats or hot dogs, tofu, bread, granola, etc. I will note that for those of you who also have a fiscal year 23 grant from last year, that there are differences here in what is an eligible food item. Most notably, fiscal year 24, this grant can support the purchases of processed foods, whereas your fiscal year 23 grant cannot. And so if you have any questions on what one of your grants can reimburse for versus another, please don't hesitate to reach out to Emily or myself. So just some additional examples of what are eligible foods. You can be purchasing fruits and vegetables, and that includes like minimally processed produce. So, pre-diced or sliced produce, frozen, canned, etc. Meat, fish, and poultry, dairy products, excluding fluid milk. So think about cheese, yogurt, butter. You can purchase eggs, beans and legumes, grains and flours, honey and maple syrup. And then specific things that are not eligible would be, again, fluid milk, any food that's grown or raised outside of Minnesota, processed products that don't contain a primary Minnesota grown or raised ingredient. We can't reimburse for any school garden produce so produce that's being grown at your school in your garden. And as mentioned earlier, we can't reimburse for food that's purchased for use outside of those specific federal meal programs that we mentioned. So we can't reimburse for classroom activities, after school programs, or special events. And just another reminder for fiscal year 23 grantees that if you have questions on the differences between these two grants, you can reach out to us.
So we just wanted to highlight to give you some idea of in the past categories of food purchases. So as Kate mentioned, we have on this slide a whole pie piece for cheese and had a wide variety of categories. This is for fiscal year 2021 grantees. Stay tuned soon for an updated chart, but just wanted to give you some ideas so you can see those two largest pieces of the pie were proteins and then fruits and vegetables. Next, thank you. And so within the produce purchases, my apologies, this got a little bit tiny, but I wanted to give you the highlight of just the breadth of different products that were purchased, and wanted to give a credit here for both the last slide and this slide. So my colleagues at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, along with Ryan Pesch and Bridget Tuck at the University of Minnesota Extension, did this analysis, and these graphs and charts are courtesy of Ryan. And so at the top there, you can see apples, as probably comes as no surprise to anyone, were the single biggest runaway winner with fiscal year 2021 produce funds. So these are all just the produce, so just that green wedge on the previous slide. And then you can see other front runners like carrots and romaine and radishes, potatoes, peppers for fiscal year 2021 grantees.
So as mentioned earlier, this grant really aims to, increase the amount of local foods that are being served in schools and early cares and be supporting Minnesota producers. So as you begin planning your purchases or making your purchases, we encourage you to keep in mind the priority areas that are established for this grant program. So the first priority is supporting emerging farmers. You may recall this as a priority from the grant RFP and from filling out your application. This grant program prioritizes applicants that buy Minnesota grown and raised foods from emerging farmers. And so now that you are grantees, we encourage you to continue thinking about how you can support emerging farmers throughout your grant project. And so emerging farmers includes farmers of color, African American, American Indian, Alaska Native farmers, women, veterans, farmers with disabilities, young farmers and beginning farmers, LGBTQIA farmers, and urban farmers. And then the second priority is to support the purchases of unprocessed or minimally processed foods. And so we encourage you to really kind of think big in terms of the wide variety of items that you can be purchasing that are unprocessed or minimally processed agricultural products here in our state, including many different culturally relevant foods. So when it comes to actually purchasing your Minnesota grown and raised foods, you have a few different ways that you can do this. So first off, you can choose to purchase directly from farmers, or you can purchase from a food hub, aggregator, or distributor. So what you see on the screen here is just kind of an example of, if you look at that top part, again, your food can be going straight from the farm to your school or early care center, or you can work with that intermediary partner like a food hub or a distributor who will help buy that product and then get it to you. And we have many different food hubs, aggregators, and distributors in our state. So for instance, some of you may already be working with a distributor like IFD or Upper Lakes Foods, for example. And then there's several food hubs in our state, including the Good Acre in Falcon Heights and Sprout, which is in Little Falls. Those are kind of brick and mortar food hubs. And then there's also several farmers market hubs around the state as well. And so you can choose one method, or you can choose kind of both and purchase your products in a variety of ways. When you are working with an intermediary vendor like a distributor or a food hub, it's important to make sure that the products you are buying are grown or raised in Minnesota. And we do require that that name of the original farm be included on the invoices that you submit to the MDA with your reporting, which Emily will be talking about in a little bit. We have just kind of some tips and strategies for finding farmers. So first off, I encourage you to check out the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory. This is a kind of searchable online database to find farmers near you. You can visit your local farmers market to find farmers. The Minnesota Farmers Market Association has a great kind of map where you can find the farmers markets near you. Attending local food shows and local food events is also a great way. So one example is the Feast event that's happening in March. And it's like a local foods trade show event, and a great way to find and connect with local producers and food makers. And then perhaps the best way is to ask around, you know, reach out to other schools or early care centers near you to ask where they're buying from, talk with, you know, your local grocery stores or restaurants. You can also reach out to kind of what we call community connectors, which are partners who are, you know, have established connections with the agricultural community in your area. So that includes county-based extension educators, local SHIP coordinators, farm service agency offices, and regional farm chapters. So just a quick kind of preview of what the Minnesota Grown Directories looks like, since this is a kind of a great first tool to try. If you go to minnesotagrown.com, the Minnesota Grown Directory, they have kind of a direct consumer facing directory. But then if you go to that top panel, there's also the wholesale directory icon, which you see at the top circled in green here. If you click on that, it'll take you to the wholesale directory, which is a subset of farms that have indicated interest in working with wholesale customers. So if you go there, then you can see that there's a search bar, there's filters, and there's a map to see different producers. And so just a few tips for using the wholesale directory. I would start by just zooming in on the map near you and seeing, you know, who are the different producers near you, what do they have to offer. If you are specifically looking for an item like carrots, you can type that into the keyword search bar. That's a great way to narrow your search. I would also say, you know, play around with those filters. So you can filter by products, so like different product categories like produce or dairy products. And then a new feature is that you can filter by producer identity. And so this is a really great way to find emerging farmers near you and start making those connections. Once you're in, once you click on a farm and you're looking at their listing, scroll down to the business experience and distribution sections. These two areas can have really helpful information just to kind of see if this farm might be a good fit. But if it's kind of sparse on information, we also have the farm's website linked there. You can go there to check it out. And then most importantly, make sure to click their contact information and just reach out and get the conversation started.
So again, just to give you an idea, as Kate mentioned, all of the above, so there can be duplication across these categories. Some schools are represented in all three of these bars, but as you can see, food hubs, wholesalers. So we're thinking of mainline distributors mostly are in that middle column there, and then direct from farms was the single biggest piece of the purchases for fiscal year 2021 purchases, and FY 2023 we're working on right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am from MDE, Jamie Anderson. I apologize for jumping in late, but wanted to share some information about procurement. So procurement with Farm to School is very similar processes and standards as procurement practices would be when you're purchasing regular food from vendors, equipment, things of that nature. So you have to ensure that there's full and open competition. So you need to make sure that when you're soliciting items that you are not restricting any potential vendors from applying by narrowing your scope or specifications too much where, you're eliminating their opportunity to submit a bid for the items that you're looking to purchase. You also want to make sure that you're working with responsible and responsive vendors. So ensure that, responsible or vendors are able to submit and complete everything that they are contracted to do. So make sure that, the terms and conditions that are stated in your contract are being met, and making sure, there's timely delivery. You can review previous track records or relationships with this vendor. And then the last thing that's specific more towards farm to school is geographic preference. So you are able to utilize geographic preference when you are soliciting farm to school items. There's no standard definition for what local is. It's really up to the SFA to describe how they want to, define local in their district and what they're purchasing. I would suggest, especially for this funding, that you would define the geographic preference as Minnesota grown. So then you could submit these purchases for reimbursement through the Agri Fund. Okay, and then this next slide, just real basics again, kind of the procurement tree, just general thinking about procurement. So, there's the formal procurement and then informal methods. Minnesota's informal procurement threshold for public schools is if a purchase is less than $175,000, you're able to use informal procurement. It does not limit you from doing, a formal procurement. If you want to do, an RFP or something of that nature for your farm to school purchases, you are by all means able to do that. But it just kind of gives a nice general breakdown of other ways that you can procure. So you can do a small purchase informal procurement method. That's kind of the 3 bids and a buy idea. So you're soliciting and asking, specifying what requirements you're looking for, and then vendors can submit their bids, and then you can determine based off of the bids as to which one you're going to purchase from. And then very common, we see the micro purchase procurement method used in farm to school purchases. And micro purchase, again, is you can use this method if the transaction total is less than $10,000 for each transaction. It's also recommended in micro purchasing if you're using it from, purchasing from vendor A, maybe for the first transaction, that you also look maybe towards vendor B, vendor C, and kind of share that purchasing power and that wealth with other vendors. So that's just a general rule of thumb when you're utilizing the micro purchasing procurement method. This next slide is very busy, but again, just another graphic and chart just to show a breakdown of the different procurement methods. And kind of give some idea as to, when to do it, how to advertise, the different type of contract, things like that. So you will be able to review some of these detailed slides and information when you receive the slide deck after the presentation today. And the next one. Okay, so after you've kind of decided what procurement method you're going to utilize, it's time to think about the specifications of your product. So again, it is okay if you don't know the answers to all of these questions. Like anything, just do the best that you can and try to think about how you're going to utilize the different foods that you're asking for. So with local foods, as with anything, how much are you going to need? How often do you want the food delivered? Is it a shelf stable item like syrup or honey, where you maybe just want one delivery at the beginning of the year? Or is it something that you would prefer, considering space constraints or logistics with your district, maybe you want it delivered every other month, whatever it might be. So thinking about that. And then thinking about how you're going to utilize the different food items. So is it something that you're going to be having on your salad bar? Are you going to be roasting it? Is it going to be pureed into a soup or a sauce? So maybe you can take a produce item that maybe has some blemishes or imperfections because it won't be served in its natural raw state. And then also thinking about how you want to receive it. I'm pretty sure nobody wants to receive a case of carrots that have chunks of soil still on the garden or from the garden into their kitchen. So, thinking that it would probably be common sense, it's always good to very specifically specify what you're looking for and how you want to receive your produce. So, how it should be packed. Do you want it frozen? Do you want a whole head, crown of broccoli, or do you want florets? Things like that level of detail. The USDA has a really helpful procurement guide that covers all sorts of different areas of procurement that we'll share again too after the presentation. I need my own personal slides are just some examples of different procurement strategies that other districts have used. So this is from Minneapolis Public Schools, and this is kind of a sheet that they give to their potential vendors and producers. It tells the producer what the item is they're looking for, the description of how they want it, how it's going to be processed or served. And then they also have some really nice visuals, and they use a baseball as kind of their standard measuring guide, something that most people are probably somewhat familiar with, the size. So I think that kind of helps show, how big do you want your patty pan squash or your potatoes or whatever it might be. The next slide is also just another example of product specifications. So this is one where they don't have any visuals. Excuse me, the first part, the verbiage part. They're explaining what they're going to be using the carrots for. They're asking, suggesting how they want it delivered, and then how often the delivery is, and then also the total amount of carrots that they're looking for. The two graphics on the bottom are from the Good Acre, and these are just really great visuals that they actually share with their producers too, so they can understand, okay, what kind of quality carrots are we looking for? How big should it be? They use a lot of just universal pictures and images, so you're not constrained by language barriers.
All right, thanks, Jamie. I'm going to do an overview of the reporting and reimbursement for these grants. So fiscal year 24 grants will have an annual reporting requirement. So I'll send out a template in November of every year, but reports will be due in December of 2024, 25, and 26. There will also be a final report that is due in March of 2027. Or when your contract is completed, whichever one comes first. And these are just sort of providing us a snapshot of sort of how your grant project is going, what are some of the successes, what are the challenges. And we also love to see photos with your reports. So as you're sort of going through your farm to school year, remember to sort of snap a picture here and there to document whether it's like a picture of your food tray or your staff who's preparing the foods. We use photos in our legislative reports and to also share just with the greater farm to school community, like the successes of our grantees. So that you can submit those as a part of your report as well. But I'll send out reminders, so don't worry. And then you can just send them back to me once you're finished. So every grant that is over $25,000 is required to have a site visit. So if you have a food grant or an equipment grant that's over $25,000, somebody from MDA, most likely myself or Kate, will be coming to your school just to kind of check in, see how things are going. We want to see if you're serving a specific farm to school item on your menu that day. It's a great time for us to come to a site visit. Or else if you have an equipment contract over $25,000, we would want to see the equipment that's been purchased and kind of how you're using it. The visits do need to be completed before we can issue your final reimbursement, but you don't need to wait until the very end to request a site visit. Just kind of keep it in mind as you're moving through your project. If you have a fun event coming up for a Minnesota Thursday and you want to invite us out, just send us an email and we'll coordinate with you to come on out and take a look. So as mentioned before, all reimbursements for this grant, or all payments for this grant, are reimbursements. So that means that you're going to be purchasing the item upfront from the vendor, paying the farmer or vendor, and then submitting those receipts to MDA for reimbursement. So when you're ready for that reimbursement, I will also send out a spreadsheet that you can fill out, a reimbursement worksheet that will sort of outline what items you're requesting reimbursement for. So if you look at the bottom of the slide here, that's just an example of what that spreadsheet will look like. So we need to know the farmer name, the distributor if you're sourcing from a food hub or a distributor, the farm and the county where that food item came from, the date of purchase, the total dollar amount that you're seeking reimbursement for, your proof of purchase, which would be your invoice, a detailed receipt, something along those lines, and then also a proof of payment, which shows that your funds have gone out, they've paid that vendor, and they've cleared your account. So that can be a bank statement, a zero balance invoice, an image of the check that's been cleared from your bank. So when you're submitting items for reimbursement, you'll send your worksheet and then the proof of purchase and proof of payment for each item that you're requesting reimbursement for. Different this year from 2023 grants, requests can be submitted as needed. 2023 grants had a quarterly reporting requirement. These grants, they're more aligned with other MDA grants, so you can request as needed. So some schools will submit or send in items for reimbursement at winter break and at the end of the school year. Some schools might just wait until the end of the school year. If you have a smaller grant, you might just wait until the very end of your grant so you've used all your funds, and then you can submit all your items to me for reimbursement. Purchases for food grants need to be completed by January of 2027 at the very latest. You certainly do not need to wait and spread your funds out until 2027. You can spend them all by the end of the 2024-25 school year if that works out for you. And then as I had mentioned earlier, there is that one-to-one match requirement for full tray grant contracts. There's no match requirement for First Bite. So just keep that in mind. If you have questions about how that works or if there's any confusion, just send me an email and I'll help you out. And then for equipment reimbursements, all equipment contracts have that one-to-one match requirement. So we will reimburse 50% of the eligible equipment expenses that you submit up to your total award amount. So if you were awarded $20,000 to buy a refrigerator, we would need to see $40,000 of expenses before we can issue that $20,000, which was your award amount. That can be a little confusing. So again, reach out if you have questions. Reimbursement documents can also be submitted as needed. Typically with equipment, grantees will submit just once or twice throughout their grant for reimbursement. And then there is a separate reimbursement worksheet that's different from the food reimbursement worksheet that I will also send out. And the information that we need for equipment is just slightly different from what we need for food. But again, you'll still be submitting invoices and proof of payment to back up your eligible equipment purchases. So again, if you have questions, please reach out. And I think, Jamie, I think you have the next slide here.
Yes, I do. Just wanted to make a note that MDE does have a pre-approved equipment list. It is on their website. And basically this is a list of all pre-approved capital expenditures that SFAs can purchase without, again, asking for any approval to purchase them. So if you are thinking about purchasing equipment, please make sure that the item that you're thinking about purchasing is on this list. If it is not on this list and it is above $5,000, then you will have to submit a pre-approval form, which can also be found on MDE's website. Submitting that form and then waiting for approval and then being able to purchase through the appropriate procurement methods. If the equipment purchase is under $5,000, then you do not need to submit a pre-approval form, and you can go ahead and just purchase using, a standard procurement purchasing methods. So just wanted to make a note of that. Also noting that if the equipment that you're purchasing is going to be drastically changing the chemistry of the food item. For example, if you're going to be purchasing a vacuum sealer or doing any type of reduced oxygen packaging processes with your farm to school items, then you will need a HACCP plan. So you'll have to create and get a HACCP plan approved. And we just happen to be having a fabulous food safety webinar on March 5th on reduced oxygen packaging that will be going through this whole process and how to write a HACCP plan and the steps needed for approval. So please tune in if that is something that you are considering purchasing with your farm to school grant money. And then also just wanted to share the UFARS codes, since these are state dollars that we will be tracking this year. We have the expense codes for both food and equipment, and then the UFARS revenue code.
All right, and just a quick reminder for those of you who have overlapping grants. Some people might have fiscal year 22, 23, and 24 farm to school grants, which is fantastic, but it can get confusing quickly. So this slide has the sort of the end date of the contracts for each year of equipment and food funds, and then also the reimbursement schedule. So fiscal year 22, well, I guess I won't go into it, but if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. This slide will also be available. You could print it off and post it somewhere so you have a reminder of sort of the end dates and the quarterly or as needed reimbursement schedule for each grant. So.
All right. So Randy, we just wanted to share kind of some of the resources and support that are out there for you as you make your way through your grant project. So first off, as you're buying new Minnesota grown and raised foods, it's great to have resources and materials in your cafeteria to help promote and highlight all those fantastic local foods. And there are great free resources that you can order to do that. So Minnesota Harvest of the Month offers free posters, stickers, salad bar clings, like small recipe cards you can send home in backpacks, all for free. So if you go to the Harvest of the Month website, you can place your order there and we'll mail it to you. The Harvest of the Month program also offers on the website, there's a recipe hub with recipes that are already standardized for schools. There's also standards-based lesson plans and activities that correspond with the 15 different Harvests of the Month food items. And we also offer quarterly meetings where you can come and make connections with other folks, hopefully get some new kind of resources and strategies to support your farm to school work. And we will be offering a monthly newsletter. And that QR code here is to subscribe to that newsletter. If you've previously received Harvest of the Month emails from us, you don't need to subscribe to this newsletter. But if you haven't been receiving those emails in the past, I encourage you to subscribe. And just go to the Harvest of the Month site and check out everything we have on there. There's great videos, all kinds of things. Also for our early care centers, I'll note that our lesson plans right now are currently focused on K-12, but we are really excited that Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy and Extension are helping to start adapting some of our resources for the early care setting. So more to come on that. Some additional free resources that you can order come from the Minnesota Grown program. So if you go to minnesotagrown.com, you can find your way to a great marketing material order form that's free. And so as schools or early care centers, you can order posters like the two you see here. That one on the left that says local foods brought to you is like really big and laminated. And so it's great. You can use a dry erase marker on it and write in what's on the menu for the day. There's also stickers and clings as well. So make sure to check out the Minnesota Grown site as well as the Harvest of the Month one. I also want to note that the Minnesota Grown program also has the Farm to School District of the Year contest. This was, we started it this past year and hope to continue it. And it's hosted during October, which is Farm to School and Early Care Month. And it's just a really fun kind of friendly competition or contest where schools get to submit pictures and information about how they celebrated October, and then we select winners. So it's just kind of a fun way to show your farm to school spirit and kind of get the word out about the great work that you're doing. So just mark your calendars for that. And then I believe Sue Knott is on to share a little bit about Minnesota agriculture in the classroom.
Hi, Kate. Yeah, thank you. And hello, everyone. So Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom is a program at the Department of Agriculture where we really try to be a personal guide for teachers who want to use agriculture within their curriculum. So we've heard about, procuring food from local farmers and using that in your food programs. We hope that that can also be, those foods can be also featured in classrooms in kindergarten through 12th grade. That's our focus, our target audience. And I know there's early care providers, like Kate said, we're working to adapt these materials for you guys as well. But just a few pieces that we have to hopefully inspire and encourage and make it really easy for K-12 teachers to use food as a context for learning in social studies and science and language arts and health and nutrition. So we have curricular tools, lesson plans, activity ideas, all aligned with academic standards. And we have a database on our lesson plan. So you could type in apples, second grade science, and then it would bring up lessons and or activities that a teacher could really easily use within their classroom with their students. We also have student engagement opportunities, and we do virtual field trips about every month during the school year. This week, you guys, is Farm and Food Book Week. So every day at 9 and 10 a.m. we have guest readers who are reading agriculture-themed children's books via Zoom. And then the classrooms who join can ask questions. So tomorrow we have two farmers, actually, Zach Johnson, who's the millennial farmer. He's well followed on YouTube and other social media challenges or channels. And then also, I think it's Karen is how you pronounce her name, Karen Costa, who is a farmer / author. So she wrote a book called Growing French Fries. So they're going to read their books via Zoom, and then classrooms can ask them questions. So the registration information is on our website that's listed at the bottom. And then we also have a farm camp that's for 5th through 12th grade students. And it's actually like a really robust field trip. So there's learning that classrooms do, or that the students do in their classroom before the field trip. Then they go to an agricultural site, and then there's some follow-up career connections. So those are all free. We also have professional development opportunities to support those teachers. And I saw some names of some folks on this call or on this webinar that have been on some of our teacher tours. So that's the highlight of this professional development. In the summer, we offer tours where we load up on a really nice air-conditioned bus and visit several farms and agricultural sites. So teachers get that firsthand experience with agriculture and food production, and then also do some curriculum connections, taking what they saw and how that can be integrated into their curriculum. And in addition to that, we offer one-on-one support. So if you have teachers in your school district that are like, oh, I would love to incorporate these foods into my classroom, I'm just not sure how, we would love to meet them one-on-one and provide some ideas and walk through some ways that can really be part of what they're doing with their students. So Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom, we are here to help really make that connection into the classrooms.
Thanks, Sue. All right, and then we also just wanted to mention that there's the Root Review newsletter, which is another great newsletter that I encourage you to sign up for if you don't already receive it. This is the newsletter sent by the Minnesota Farm to School Leadership Team, and it's a quarterly newsletter that's filled with information about farm to school and early care opportunities, resources, trainings, grants, etc. So we promise not to flood your inbox too often, but hopefully each edition has really helpful information to help you with farm to school and early care work. And I'll pass it to Nora.
Sure. So just wanted to highlight some existing resources, and for the early care folks watching this or on the webinar right now, obviously these are past webinars, so they were K-12 oriented, but a lot of these same the same information would be really applicable to early care centers. So all of the recordings of those previous ones mentioned on that slide, local foods around the tray, local proteins, purchasing local produce, are on the farmtoschoolmn.org website there, and we'd encourage new grantees to review those. And then, as Jamie mentioned, upcoming this year is a Farm to School food safety series. Again, I would say a lot of this is applicable in early care settings that have their own kitchen context, have their own kitchen, excuse me, and do their on-site prep. So we've got reduced oxygen packaging, more commonly known as vacuum sealing, local animal proteins, and then wild foods and more. And those are specifically the food safety. I would encourage folks, there's a previous proteins webinar just talking about sourcing and that kind of stuff. So all of the registration links can be found on that farmtoschoolmn.org website. And then I wanted to plug, I see many faces or names that are already familiar, but if you aren't familiar, Farm to School and Early Care Technical Assistance office hours, second Wednesday of the month at 2:30, and just register one time and you'll get the invite every month, and you come whenever you want and don't when you don't. And then I just wanted to plug, we're hoping to continue the grant evaluation for fiscal year 2024. There's a fiscal year 2023 process that's already underway and will be ongoing. And there is a report that has a lot more detail currently up about the fiscal year 2021 grantees. If you're interested, I just put the link in the chat. I would encourage you, if you're actually reading it, to download the PDF. It just looks nicer and I find it a little easier to read.